Chad, what do you think of that intro, by the way? Chad Hastings sitting in this morning. How did that make you feel?
It's very mellow, man. I like it. It's like a mellow Thursday vibe.
It is mellow. Alex made that, by the way. That's an Alex Dunlap creation. And then when I said something, I was like, that was smooth, easy listening jazz. And he didn't like that. He didn't like that. I think he thought it was more upbeat than it was. I think he was like, he took offense to it just a little bit. He goes, that's not smooth listening. It's not jazz. I'm like, oh, it's really relaxed.
It's the ending that is. See, it's it's that relaxing finish. You know, It's like what I'm assuming the best products at Rogue Shop can provide you, which is a wonderful moment that's got some rock and roll in it. And then it just finishes out perfectly.
Speaking of perfect, Chad Hastings sitting in here on the old-fashioned show this morning. We're going to have a fun show today because, first of all, I always like talking to Chad. Chad is great. Chad and I were talking. We realized that we are some of the older people here at Orange Bloods because, I woke up at the crack of dawn. Roosters came out. And I'm like 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, Chad, I got an idea for the show. And just not long after that, Chad's like, I like that idea. Still no sun up. And that's when you know you're old, right? Because old people, Chad, my kid said something to me recently that made me realize how old I really am. And it's such a subtle thing. But I realized this. My kid said to me, my 5-year-old kid, he said to me, Dad, it's like you never sleep. I never see you sleeping. You know what I used to think about that? I used to think about like grandpa, but they would always be awake because they say old folks are scared to die, so they never go to sleep.
Right.
And I'm like, that's where I felt like I just sucked into that. Like I got sucked into that vortex, Chad.
That must be it. Rodolfo's saying, Anwar, the old head. Hey, we get there. And you just, I don't know what it is. Maybe you think we're going to miss something or right. If you're awake, they can't take me when I'm awake. I got to be here. I got to be awake. But I'm looking forward to the conversation today, Anwar, because I've been thinking about quarterbacks this week for different reasons. And we're sitting here today. Everybody knows I love to count it up. We're 19 days till spring practice. Okay. We are 19 days till spring and the official beginning of Arch is the backup quarterback. Quinn is the main guy. How's it all going to work? What's the dynamic? So there's a lot of different conversations that can be had, but the one that you brought up today and that we'll get into, I think is also an interesting conversation of amongst the rivalries in the three-way, the triple threat match of Texas, OU, and A&M. Let's talk about these quarterbacks, where they are and where the fan bases are on their guys, because I think it's an interesting discussion to say to all three fan bases, is this your guy and are you good? Or would you take door number 2 or door number 3?
It's a fascinating conversation, Chad. So before we get into it, Chad, it's springtime. Trying to buy a house. I just feel like it's spring. You're thinking to yourself, you know what? I'm not going to clean this house. I'm just going to buy another one, right? I'm not going to spring clean this home. I'm not going to do anything other than find myself a new home. And Eric Sells Homes TFW. He's the guy to do it. If you're looking to buy a home, looking to sell a home, my main man, El Presidente, has got you covered. Check out that QR code. My guy will take care of you. He's a Longhorn fan. Predicted 12-0 last season. Almost came close, but more importantly, he's a good guy. He'll take care of you. He's one of us. Eric Sells Homes DFW. Check it out one more time. Eric Torres, El Presidente. Eric Sells Homes DFW. Chat.
So Anwar, is that like a different kind of spring cleaning? It's like we could clean this house or we could just move.
Hey, why not? Just find a new locale. So, Chad, I want to lean on you for a second because you've been doing this, for a long time. You've been around this three-headed rivalry before I've ever had a chance to step place in here. from your historical perspective, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, has there been a time when all three programs have perceivably had a badass quarterback? And why I say that is because Quinn Ewers, that's a 5-star coming out of high school. Connor Weigman, 5-star coming out of high school. Again, depending on your rankings, with Jackson Arnold, 5-star coming out of high school as well. I think Rivals may have had Weigman as a 4-star. I believe that might be true, but I think 24/7 may have him as a 5-star. Regardless, all were considered to be bad men at that position. And then I know there's been times where, let's say Oklahoma's had a Baker Mayfield, and they've been kind of a head and shoulders above the rest. And Texas A&M may have had Johnny, right? But the other programs didn't have something as good as this. Is this one of the first times that you could remember where all three programs had basically 5 stars going into the season?
I would argue yes. I'm trying to think of it in my mind where maybe the 2 of them would have it, but 1 would not. That balance, I don't know, has been there for all 3 of them. The stat, Anwar, I always like to throw out that Ketch and I discussed way back in the day. It's the one stat when I said it to Ketch, it just froze him, was that Texas and Texas A&M have never had back-to-back simultaneous 9-win seasons. It's never happened with those 2 schools. So if that's true, then it would tell you those 2 have never truly been good to great at the same time for a couple years. And then you can throw in Oklahoma and kind of do the different math there. But I would make the argument that if all 3 of these guys live up to it, if they ultimately end up living up to it, it might be the only example you could have at the exact, at that same time. We could go back to, different eras and break it down. It's not, I've never thought of it as those 3 quarterbacks at the same time. It's a great question. I can't think of one off the top of my head, because if you go back to the 80s, you can maybe go back into those discussions of in the 80s when the Aggies got on their run, there were some impressive teams there, but would you really call those, were those quarterbacks really a 5-star level quarterback, or was it just more of a team around them? So I'm going to say it's probably unique if it happens. And that's why I think it's such an interesting conversation of if it all pans out, Quinn Ewers is panning out in front of us. These other 2 guys, though, it's the what do we know about Weigman and especially Jackson Arnold. That's what I'd love to know, Anwar, deep down from an OU fan. An OU fan's going to tell a Texas fan today they believe in Jackson Arnold because they kind of have to. An A&M fan will tell a Texas fan they believe in Weigman because they kind of have to. And I guess Texas fans would tell both of those fan bases they believe in Quinn Ewers. I don't know if they do it because they feel like they have to or if they absolutely believe what they're saying. But that's the discussion today of, would I exchange him if I could? Or do I think everybody's got the guy they need to have? It's a wild one, but I think the answer is yes. I think we have a chance to see all 3 of them as they head to the SEC have that best quarterback performances, at the same time. I mean,
really, Chad, after Colt, I mean, the most elite guy was probably Garrett Gilbert after Colt McCoy, and then it's probably just a lot of just guys after that. Your David Ashes of the world, Tyrone Swoops, Rod Hurd, Sam Elliott. Like it just,
and Colt in high school wasn't 5-star.
Yeah.
Right. Colt was that incredible gift that Texas got, and he turned into a badass in terms of the performance, but that wasn't what he was in high school. So, again, like you're talking about, it's about the pedigree in high school translating into, because in one case here, let's go to the bottom of the stat ladder here, Anwar. What Oklahoma is telling us is, no. We're good letting that guy go to Oregon.
Yeah.
We're good. It's like, well, no, wait, but Dylan's got all that experience. Oh, yeah. And the yards and the touch. Yeah, we know. He can sling it all over. Yeah, we got it. The kid's fine. Kid's ready to roll. We can't wait any longer. We're not going to let that kid be babysat one more year. Y'all get ready. Here it comes, Jackson Arnold. That's the argument they're making to their fans.
It has got to be something because, it's, the saying in the NFL, obviously, one of my sayings in the NFL was always like, you don't have a franchise quarterback until you have a franchise quarterback. And I know it's really simplistic to say that, but you just can't win in the NFL realistically without that. And I understand, Brock Purdy, there's your anomalies here and there, but for the most part, you're going to need a guy. And Brock Purdy played good, by the way, so there's a little bit disrespect on his name. But you look at college football landscape, Chad, those teams that go far, those teams that go into playoffs, so you look at the teams that were contending last year, they all had pretty damn good quarterbacks. Like, it wasn't really a ton of slouches that were there that you just said to yourself, that guy's the bus driver, right? There wasn't that thing. There wasn't that's my Trent Dilfer, give you your Bucks reference. Wasn't like that Brad Johnson, that's more of a Bucks reference than anything else, right? There wasn't anything to that effect. It was more so, hey, these guys are elite. Penix is going to be elite. Quinn Ewers is elite. Jalen Milroe, he was elite at times, so pretty consistent last season. Couple of bad games here and there. The Michigan quarterback, all those guys were really good. And so for Oklahoma to say, yeah, we got Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, we know exactly what he did against Texas in that game. That was really cool, right? Really good moments about how he was basically able to carry this team on this back. Yeah, you can go though. Like, that guy is good. I'm like, how good is Jackson Arnold? Where you let a guy who's been playing for like 10 years in college, I don't know how long Dylan Gable's been playing, but he's been playing that darn long. It's like him and Casey Thompson, like two guys who just are never going to leave, right? I'm just going to play as long as I can. For them to let him go, yes, that staff has to feel good. It has to be comfortable with him. And, puts themselves out there just a little bit. If you let that guy walk and Jackson Arnold is kind of a struggling, kind of meandering kind of guy, then you start wondering, like, all right, what's going on with the staff? But they have to feel really, really good about him. I'm curious from you, thinking about Arnold, and then, of course, there's Weigman. Tell me about the Texas A&M side of this one as well, because again, Connor comes in as a bad mamma jamma. Like, and I know Arch got all the hub and the hype in that class because he's Arch Manning, and Texas A&M, they get their 5-star as well. What's been your assessment? What do I need to know about that guy to know that he, Texas A&M then said we need to go to the transfer portal and find a stopgap. Like, that guy is ready.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In fact, before I get into it, I'd say Brandon has an interesting chat here to get further in. He said Ewers has done it on the field, won a Big 12 championship, made the CFP. Arnold and Weigman are all just about potential. We haven't seen them actually do it yet. Brandon, I think there's an argument for what you're saying. Here's the weird part about Weigman. To get to your question, Anwar, I think he's in the middle. I think there's a discussion about Ewers that we've seen. I think there's a discussion about Arnold that you're going to have to trust the OU staff that they've seen it in practice and that he's enough of a badass. So, because to look at the numbers for Jackson Arnold, it's 64% last year, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, but he only had 69 pass attempts. 69. That does not give you the feeling of, oh yeah, man, I've seen him do it. 563 yards. It's okay. It's a start, but it's nothing you would really argue, oh my God. But Weigman's got a little bit more. Weigman's almost at 1,000 yards passing, 979. And Anwar, he was the guy. He got hurt. He was absolutely the guy. It was 69% completion percentage. I like to see it at 65 or higher. That's when I know you're a quarterback. That's when I know I can count on you. He's at 69% percentage, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks. Both picks were against LSU. He was clean. He went 8 touchdowns, no picks to start his career. And that was also, remember, that was the back end of the previous season and the beginning of the next. Because Jimbo got around to Weigman at the backside of that other season of 22. So his rating is 156.8 for Weigman. The rating for Quinn Ewers last year was 158.6. Quinn obviously has way more attempts. He's up at 394 attempts. He's also at 69% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Those two numbers are pretty close. Mm-hmm. So the argument I would make, Anwar, and the argument Aggie fans are having to make right now is this. They were seeing it. They saw it on the field. There was some deep ball accuracy. Stewart and Muhammad made great plays for him, but Weigman was showing it to you. I would argue Weigman was showing it to you when he was the guy. So far, Jackson Arnold just hasn't been the guy. That would be the argument.
I pulled up the stats for your Chad, just so you would have it while we're talking. Everybody else can see it. To your point, I mean, when the guy was playing, I mean, again, small sample size, but the New Mexico game. I mean, still, you got to tell me more about that Miami game and what happened, in that one. Monroe. I mean, and by the way, 1,000 yards in 4 games is not too bad, especially when you got hurt in one of them. So we're basically talking about 1,000 yards passing in 3 games.
Yeah, and by the way, that's my bad. I said 2 against LSU. It was 2 against Miami. He was in last year at the end of the year. He quarterbacked against LSU when they got that win in 22, and he had no interceptions coming into the year. It was 8 touchdowns and no interceptions at one point. That you had no interceptions rather coming into the year. The game against Miami, they just they had some very sloppy moments. And frankly, Anwar, I didn't like a lot of the way that game was called both ways, offense, defense. I thought they got real sloppy both ways, got really weirdly overconfident. But they also thought he could, go head up with Van Dyke and out-duel him, and that they were gonna, really go after it. But if you go throw that back up real quick on the number,
sure.
One of the things I had forgotten about. Let me see what that was. Yeah, the idea that they were going to Miami. I mean, look at the attempt number, 53.
That's crazy.
Like, I'm not saying you couldn't. In theory, by the end of that game, somebody's going to tell me, "Look, Chad, the defense gave up 48. Like, you needed to score." Yeah, I guess, but A&M was absolutely not balanced. A Jimbo Fisher coach team went into that game and couldn't find their balance. Couldn't find a running game. The offensive line started to show its big issues in that game, and Weigman clearly was not good. So that to me is what happened there. But overall, I think you were starting to see it. And obviously there's got to be some trust on now it's new coaching staff, Colin Klein's offense, whatever all that's going to be. But I think Weigman has shown you enough of those moments. I would just ask an OU fan, has Jackson Arnold showed you enough that you're absolutely trusting it and you're good with what's happening, or are you concerned? Are you worried a little bit? I'll tell you, Anwar, as an A&M fan, I don't go into it with worry. If Weigman's healthy, I think things could work out for A&M. Now, they got to deal with that offensive line and some other things because if you're talking about team that's around these quarterbacks, I will absolutely take Quinn Ewers' situation every day of the week over the other 2 guys right now, easily.
So let's say this. Right now, we will say Quinn's in this conversation. Quinn's number 1 for all the reasons that were just outlined before, leading his team to the college football playoffs. He's a Heisman candidate. So we're not going to put those guys, the 2 guys, on the Quinn Ewers status. He's alone in this conversation. The only thing they all have in common was a high ranking coming out of high school at this moment, right? So of the guys who are left, though, Chad, if you got to give me your number 2 and your number 3 guy, are you going Weigman 2 and are you going Arnold 3, or are you reversing that? I'm just kind of curious because we got number 1. That's fine going into the conversation. No one's going to debate that. Well, who's 2 and 3 for you?
You're saying of these 3 guys?
Of these 3.
Yeah, I mean, because there have been more meaningful snaps, I would lean towards Weigman. Because there's been more meaningful snap. There was a moment, Anwar, in the early part of last year where, and you know me, I try to be as realistic an Aggie as has ever lived. And I try to just tell it like I see it. try not to let the maroon glasses get in the way or whatever. Or I try not to let the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing and have been doing for 25 years get in the way. If I think Texas looks bad, I'll tell you they look bad. If I think the Aggies look good, I'll tell you I think they look good, and I'll certainly reverse it. So there was a moment last year early in the season where I thought, man, I think I'd rather have Weigman right now on a generic team. Just what he was showing me, I thought, I don't know. It might be there. But then we had that section of the season, Anwar, I'll admit, once you got past that OU game, it felt like to me. Some of it was in Tuscaloosa. But as you got through that OU game and Texas really started to find itself offensively, it switched, obviously, to Ewers. Now, I wish we could have seen Weigman continue to play, and then I could have really had the conversation. But then QUINN turned into a different quarterback to me and really got some things going. But I think Weigman would be the second guy. Oklahoma fans might disagree, but to me, less than 70 attempts. I mean, the rating is 142.7. In college, if you go 142.7 over your whole career, you are not a superstar. You're not. You need to have that number. Anwar, correct me if I'm wrong. Where do you want that number? You want it about 160 for an average?
Yes. I can live with 160. I don't want to live with much less than that.
Exactly. So you don't want to be there. And again, to talk about where the ceiling could be, QUINN and Weigman both under 160, like I talked about. 158.6 last year for QUINN, 156.8 for Weigman. There's room. Clearly, there's room with Weigman because you just didn't see much. But that's the beauty of it, Anwar. If you're a Texas fan, you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute. Went to the playoff, offensive line, getting better, feeling like it's going to be really good. Here's the receiver situation. You're putting it all together in your head, and you're thinking, and QUINN wasn't his absolute badass best. It feels like there's more there. And if he takes it yet another step coming off of a playoff run, good grief. What are we looking at? So I think deep down, an Aggie fan and an Oklahoma fan would have to admit to you today, hey, secret ballot, nobody's going to know you voted, but you'd take Ewers right now, right? Knowing everything else knowing what your team is, you would take that guy to quarterback your team and you'd roll the dice, right? I think the answer would have to be yes. If you're wearing maroon or crimson, I think the answer has to be yes right now.
So let me stay with this. I went in while you were talking. I went ahead and pulled this up here, Chad. Okay. So when we look at the schedule, and people have Texas at that like 10-win kind of category. When you look at Oklahoma in their SEC schedule, and you look at Texas A&M, who do you think finishes with more wins this season? Does Oklahoma finish with more? Because from if you go on betting odds right now, the betting odds have Oklahoma finishing with a better record than Texas A&M. I had it up there recently, I believe, where they were a little bit more middle of the pack. But I'm just kind of curious for you, when you look at what they have, Oklahoma, Bama at home, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. Of course, that's neutral site. When you look at those two, who do you think finishes with more wins?
Right now, my gut would tell me I think it's going to be very, very close, but I kind of agree with the projection I saw that would have A&M kind of in an 8, maybe 8-9 discussion and Oklahoma in a 7-8 discussion. I think it might be that tight. Here's a number that jumped out to me, Anwar. When they did I think it's ESPN that does this ranking. They do what they call the SP Plus ranking, where you put everything together, and they're talking about right now what these teams are based on transfers and recruiting classes and all this kind of stuff. Right now, based on, and Texas is 4 in that ranking, and you can look at kind of who's going to be, who are you facing and where are they ranked and all that kind of stuff. But Oklahoma finishes the year at Ole Miss, then they play Maine, at Missouri, Alabama at home, at LSU. Those 4 good teams are in the top 11 of that ranking. 4 of the top 11, and that's 4 of their last 5 ball games. and 3 of them are on the road. It is a rough ending for Oklahoma. So I think when I look at A&M's schedule, when I look at Texas's schedule, I see things where I've said it, the SEC was cruel but fair. And I still think I would still argue they were cruel but fair to OU, but man, there's a heavy weight at the end of that schedule that I'm interested to see how they do. So I think it's a battle. I think it's a battle between those two. I think Texas's 2 main rivals are going to be fighting for who gets more wins. Frankly, I don't know. I know a lot of people want to make the A&M story into, a big joke that gets bigger, but with the talent they already had there, with the coaching ability Mike Elko's already shown, heck, with the play calling ability Colin Klein's already shown, I think the idea that A&M is going to be only like a 5 or 6 win football team, I think that's underselling them. I think they're going to be up higher than that. I don't know that they get to 10, but I think they might end up with a win or 2 more than OU.
It's interesting, Chad. It just in going to a Texas perspective. I mentioned this. I did a little video of Bet Online AG, and they came out with their SEC Conference Championship odds, Chad. And so recently, you saw Texas. They put them at a 5-2. You see A&M there at a 22-1. What's really interesting, Chad, though, if you start it from this and you go to at least go to Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah.
You start at Oklahoma. Texas plays Oklahoma at 50-1. They play Kentucky this season at 80-1. They don't play South Carolina. They also play Florida. They play Arkansas. They play Mississippi State, and they play Vanderbilt. So you're basically talking, I think, 6 out of 7 teams, Chad, that have the worst odds of winning the SEC conference this season is on Texas' schedule. So when you talk about cruel, it's almost an unusual gift. It's potentially for Texas, because you're looking from an odds standpoint, 6 teams or so that they're facing have the worst odds, Chad, of winning this conference.
Yeah, and again, that's why I say cruel but fair with what the SEC did to them, because the cruelty is back-to-back OU Georgia. That's cruelty. The cruelty is 2 out of 3 games. You have to deal with the emotion of Fayetteville and College Station. Those, to me, are the 2 moments the SEC said to Texas, like, hey, oh, and by the way, hey, good news, you get to play Georgia at home, but you got to play our best. You got to play the team that's been our big dog for, for years now. And I think that's what but then when you, like you said, look at the rest of it, look who Texas has to play. I think there's some livable things to it. By the way, Anwar, somebody mentioned in the chat, this is a great point to that chatter, that Oklahoma's non-conference is going to really help them out. OU plays Temple, Houston, Tulane, and Maine in non-con.
Maine has a football team?
Maine has a football team. The Black Bears are bringing a football team. But Anwar, remember, so what does that mean? Let's go to A&M. A&M's got 3 they should handle, but what's that other non-con? Right away, Notre Dame. So there's tons of reasons why A&M beating Notre Dame would be a big deal for them, but that's another one. If I'm right and they can get a game or 2 up on OU by the end of it, they're going to have to clean that non-conference, because, again, we're all about to walk in. I've been in the world for a while as an A&M fan. Texas fans and Oklahoma fans are about to join the craziness of the SEC. But, Anwar, it also means as long as you have 8 conference games, you can cover some things up and find extra wins, because you're allowed to schedule that extra non-con. You can schedule super easy games if you want, and no one will notice because the rest of your schedule is so hard. I just mentioned how hard the end of Oklahoma's schedule is, but it includes Maine. And then earlier in the season, it's 3 they should handle. So now I say that Tulane's been pretty good, and Houston, who knows? Now, because Houston's no longer, that's not some G5 anymore.
No.
So we'll see. We'll see. If Houston upsets Oklahoma, then it's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, that I think that's kind of how I size those 2 up. But at this point, and whether they like it or not, going into the SEC, they're both looking up at Texas, obviously. OU was pretty damn good last year. That was a pretty good team. That's a 10-win team. They weren't fantastic, but they were kind of like a LSU or Missouri or Ole Miss to me. Like, do you really want that team in a postseason game?
Yeah.
Whereas A&M going into the season, it felt different. They're obviously a step below that, and I'll admit it. I might be putting a little too much faith in what Elko and Klein and that talent is going to put together. But I think once that does come together, if they can get the win against Notre Dame, I think they've got a chance to be better than OU.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm on the opposite end of it. And I know that this, Texas fans won't love what I'm going to say because, I know OU sucks. I got it. I got it, Texas fans. I know what you're going to say, right? But for me, that being said, I think low-key Venables doesn't get enough credit for what he does out there, Chad. They recruit very well. But very, very well. I know people don't like to hear that, but they've actually done a really good recruiting job out there. I think Venables, some of his quotes are a little bit odd, blowing and going. Like I don't know some of that stuff. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where we're headed with some of that. But low key, look, he beat Texas last year. So I know this guy can coach. I know this guy knows what he's doing. I have to believe that if they let Dylan Gabriel walk, that Jackson Arnold is that dude. And that to me is the wild card factor in all these conversations that we have, right? Is that we know Chad, and if Ketch was here, he'd start spitting off his 5-star stats. He loves to talk about 5 stars and NFLs and all that other kind of stuff, right? But if you have a 5-star quarterback in your program, that's a program changer. That's who that guy is, and that's the odds are usually more in favor that guy will be a program changer for you than it'll be a failure. And so what's interesting within that conversation is when you talk about Weigman, right? You might be we don't know about Texas A&M, but we know for sure that Weigman is a 5-star, aka program changer, and we don't know what that could look like. Same thing for Jackson Arnold. We may think, oh, maybe OU's at 9 wins or 10 wins. But if you've got a program changer at the quarterback position, you could be underselling it. You could be absolutely underselling it when it's all said and done. And so, and God forbid, we don't know what this Texas team looks like if Quinn Ewers has any kind of hiccups. And Arch is now the guy that we're talking about in this conversation, right? Because now, if there's anything that happens and Quinn has to stay healthy, and that's been a battle for the last few years of him playing. Now we're having a conversation. What does it look like for Arch or Connor or Jackson Arnold as far as who are those guys, right? And so that it'll be interesting just because I know, again, a franchise quarterback, just use NFL terms, but a guy like that could change. Chad, you've seen it. You've seen quarterbacks just carry average teams, good teams on their back and just make that thing go. And you never know what could happen if any of those guys catch lightning in a bottle. Chad, too. Can we talk about something that you like to talk about? Can we nerd out for a second?
We can nerd out a little bit. I'll try not to nerd out too much if you if you like.
Let's talk playoffs.
All right.
Playoffs.
I think a quick update for everybody on playoff stuff. And also coming up, we got a little something from Alex Dunlap and Cody Carpentier. They are in Indy getting ready for the combine. Today is D-line freaky day. D-line linebacker, big freaks being big freaky today. Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. And what's the weigh-in going to be for Sweat? That's today. They'll get a little preview of that coming up. But Anwar, I just want everybody to understand that there's been 2 different stories come out about a 14-team playoff. And I think one of them got everybody to just go, okay, fine. The second one's doing the same thing, but I want them to understand one little change here is a pretty big change. So they are talking about a 14-team playoff to start in 2026 and move forward. So apparently we're going to get 2 years of a 12-team playoff. But now here's what they're talking about. They're talking about 3 guaranteed spots for the SEC. 3 of them, not just the champ. 3 guaranteed spots SEC, 3 guaranteed spots Big Ten, and then the Big 12 and ACC would agree to 2 spots each, guaranteed. So we've been talking about Big 12 champ would have to get in. No. We're talking about 2 Big 12 teams would get in, then 2 ACC, then one
10 teams. We got 10 teams in so far.
Yeah, and then we got one group of 5.
Okay.
So Anwar, that means you are locking in 11 teams a year.
Yes.
11 out of 14. So in the end, you are left with 3 at large?
Yes.
3.
So that means Chad, in that scenario, Notre Dame is screwed, right?
Notre Dame is screwed. No. It's okay. Somebody else that would get screwed. If Notre Dame is in the top 14, they'll put in the waiver that says they're in automatically, and then you'd only have 2 at-larges.
Oh.
Remember the old days when Notre Dame had if they win 9 games or more, they're into the discussion. They get into the alliance or they get into whatever. Same kind of deal. So Notre Dame would get that automatic. So what I am telling Texas fans, A&M fans, hell, Ohio State fans and Michigan fans is that based on the numbers of last year, each of your conferences would have had 5 teams in. But in this new idea, one of you would still get 5, or excuse me, in a 14 team, one of you would have had 7. SEC would have had 7 teams in. Big Ten would have had 6. In the new idea, the Big Ten would have 5, and the SEC would only have 4. So listen to me. OU, LSU, and Ole Miss, out. By my count, my ranking and just looking at what the rankings would have been, they would be out, and you would have to put Arizona, Oklahoma State as the 2 Big 12 teams, and Louisville as the other ACC team in. You'd have to do it based on this agreement. So just keep your eyes peeled because they want to do this in the next few weeks, Anwar. We may get the system that'll move forward in 2026, literally in the next 2 weeks. But the other thing to keep in mind is SEC and Big Ten are also trying to get a bigger cut of the money.
I was going to say we got to follow. So I just was going to ask you, hold on. All of it always leads back to let's talk to me about the money. Let's follow the money trail.
I know. The old way is take 80%, split it among the Power Fives. The new way might be take that 80%, but 25 to 30% of that of the total hunk goes to the Big Ten and the SEC, and then 15 to 20% goes to Big 12 ACC. But the real loser, Anwar, might be G5s, because right now those G5s are splitting 20% of the total pie. This idea might have them splitting 6 to 10% of the total pie.
And that also would include Notre Dame, though, correct? Because Notre Dame would be in that bottom 4, right?
That could be true. Now, from what I'm reading, what I think they do with Notre Dame is if Notre Dame meets a certain requirement APR-wise, which you know they will because they're Notre Dame, they're going to set a payment in for them at like $3 or $4 million or whatever. Okay. So rest assured, whatever that G5 number is, I think Notre Dame's going to be able to slot themselves above that.
Well, if you're the G5, though, you got to be happy just to be there, right? And that's what they're looking. They're looking at it like, hey, you are G5, so we're letting you in. Yeah. Who would have been the G5 team in 2020 if this thing happened like in last season? Who's the G5 team that would have been it?
Liberty.
Okay, gotcha.
And Liberty would come to Austin to play the 14-3 game.
Okay, gotcha. In fact, the good part is if you're the SEC, you get at least 3, potentially 4, right? If at large, so you get 3, but you also get more of the pie. And so if you get more of that money, then so be it, right? I mean, the SEC isn't going to make a huge haul off of a wild card game per se.
Yeah. So now, Anwar, I'm going to ask the real big question. Now that all this is going on, now that the SEC and the Big Ten might want to reset things before we even see what a 12 team looks like. Here's my big question to Greg Sankey. Are you sure you want to talk about 9 conference games? You're sure?
Yeah.
Guaranteed 3 spots, but now you got to allow that for the ACC and that for the Big 12. This world that SEC fans been talking about, Anwar, we could get half the teams in a 14-team playoff. No, you can't. Not now. I mean, in theory, the most you could get, think about what we just said, 3 guaranteed, 3 at large. That's 6. You're capped now. At the absolute best, you could get 6. When in an old world, who knows what you could have gotten in a 12. You could have gotten maybe as many as 7. How greedy do you want to get? Do you really want to go to 9 conference games? Do you want to get to the end of the year and hand half of your conference a loss on purpose? Or do you want to continue to give all 8 of those teams, plus the other half, give all 16 of them the option to schedule Maine or a team like that? When Oklahoma scheduled
USF.
Yes, USF, Lamar, Tarleton, SFA. Pick your example in your state. Akron, whoever that happens to be. Do you want to allow one more of those? Because Anwar, that lets you build a couple more 10-win teams.
Yeah.
Than the Big Ten. The Big Ten's already said they're going to go at 9. Why would you join them? No. Why would you agree to do the same thing they're about to do?
You know, if only if they felt like that would move the committee, and if they feel like it's the Texas Alabama of this past season, where neither team, but Alabama wasn't basically penalized for the loss. And so if they feel like an Alabama loss to Texas is going to be better than an Alabama win versus William and Mary, you know, that maybe that's the only argument I can go with, Chad, that says, all right, they feel like strength of schedule will factor in more so than anything. But yes, you know, the thing is, it's about getting getting at least a team or two in one of those last 4 spots. You know, and if G5's in, that's 11. So really, if you got 3 left, right, really becomes G5 is 11. Notre Dame at number 2 for the 12 spot, right? It only becomes 2 more spots left. So if you're the SEC, that becomes is a 9-3, but you have a loss in conference better than a 10-2 team from a Big 12 or an ACC or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think it's going to be all about the sort of 10, 11, 12, 13 seeds. It's going to be that area. The 14 is always going to be the G5 unless it's a weird season. It would have been I went over the last 10 years. The 14 would have been the G5 every year. So you do that and then start slotting it up. 13, 12, 11. And like I said earlier, it's teams like this year's Oklahoma, this year's Ole Miss, this year's LSU. That's who would get screwed. Heisman winner, Daniels at quarterback, dangerous offense. I know about the defense, but a dangerous, interesting team would have to go off to a bowl game that's meaningless and watch Arizona or Oklahoma State play instead of them. That doesn't feel right to me, but that's what they're thinking about.
All right, Chad. Well, listen, Alex and Cody are in Indianapolis. And like you said, today's super freaky day where, look, if you are an NFL scout and GM, you're cool with the receivers that run the 4-3s and 4-4s. Like that, you kind of seen that and been there, done that. But we see the big guys out there doing it. That's what moves the needle. So let's see what Alex and Cody have for us today, Chad. And let's see what's on their agenda. Let's go ahead and sound.
The old-fashioned show. Gosh, on a Thursday. So happy to be here with you guys, recapping what went down yesterday in Indianapolis. Just kind of busting in here. No frou-frou games. No jokes on Anwar like he played on me yesterday.
No cha-chas, Boomer.
about the Kalahari slide. None of this stuff. We're going to talk football. And so Wednesday was the day when we got Tavondre Sweat. He had his interview. That whole thing, that little bit of a thing. We'll get into that.
2 hours.
It wasn't a 2-hour interview. You can listen to that guy for 2 hours. He's funny as hell. we had T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, Jalen Ford yesterday. Today being Thursday, we'll have Jatavian Sanders and Ryan Watts. I think the busiest day will probably be Friday. Then we'll get Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Whittington, Jay Brooks,
and Keelan.
And Keelan Robinson, and then Saturday we'll get Christian Jones.
Yep.
So it was our first day to be able to get to kind of interact with these guys, and it was super cool. Nobody's weighed in yet. They'll weigh in tomorrow. They'll weigh in on Thursday so they'll do the on-field.
The afternoon.
The on-field drills on Thursday. Was it 2 o'clock?
3 o'clock Eastern time. 3 o'clock Eastern time. So Sweat Murphy will be on the field.
2 Central. You'll be able to tune in later today and watch that if you can get away and get on some sort of television service. I think it'll be on NFL Network for sure. So what did they say today? So all right. So the first thing with Sweat is that, man, he was supposed to have his interview with and what it is like we talked about yesterday. They have all these podiums set up, and the national media goes around. And if you kind of only been slightly familiar with the player during the college football season, you go talk with them, interact with them. People sometimes ask really stupid questions. Sometimes people ask good, insightful questions. Clearly, we wanted to ask a whole lot of questions of these guys because we think about this stuff a lot, and they have some good insight about the team and what we kind of think about moving forward. Sweat was supposed to go at 10 a.m. Eastern and didn't show up and never showed up. And Mike Signor, who's like the director of communications for the NFL, kept on coming out and saying, he's going to come. But apparently he got caught up in his medicals for a little while there. Yeah. And they had to send out a whole advisory to everybody in the credentialed media saying like, all right, Sweat's finally coming out. It was like 2.5 hours after he was supposed to come, because he had to go off premises to an off-site facility for some kind of test. Cody and I joked about the idea that it might be that he might have been too big to get in one of these MRI tubes. It's a standard issue one. But you would think you would hope it's not anything more ominous than that, where they're having to test some kind of underlying thing, or they found something. Whenever we got to talk to him, maybe we just start with Sweat.
I think so.
Whenever we got to talk to him, the first thing I asked him, I just said, like, are we good with the medicals? Or, he's like, yeah, man, but medicals come first. That's why we're here. And, we just had to go do some stuff. And I'm like, but everything's fine. You checked out. He's like, clean bill of health. I'm good. I'm ready to go. And before anybody asks, I'm doing all the drills, and you guys are going to go like this. And for anybody listening, what I just did was I gave like a shocked face, and that's kind of that's kind of what Sweat said. He wasn't going to say what he was planning on weighing in at. He said
he looked lean.
He looked good though, man.
Tight, like, he looked tightened up.
Yep. He looks good. I think he looks a good 15 to 20 pounds lighter than he played at during the season. And so if you think he probably played around 380, that's what some of the guys around the team say. I think he'll weigh in somewhere 360, 365, something like that. That's sort of what he was hinting at, that he wanted to weigh in at, because he was saying, dude, I played at 365 all season. You guys saw how I played all season. A bunch of zingers from that guy. I guess some interesting. So maybe we'll hit on a couple things. The Kelvin Banks stuff, the Alfred Collins stuff. We
looked at you like you had 4 eyes and something for a nose about when you asked about when the conversation about Alfred Collins came up.
Yeah, well, I was just like, man, I was like, T'Vondre, with you and Murphy being gone, clearly it leaves the big hole on the interior, the defensive line that we've talked about incessantly, right? And I said, can Alfred Collins play the nose or the one shade? And he's like, can Alfred Collins play he said Alfred can play whatever Alfred can play. Of course he could play it. He was talking about how he's the GOAT and he's goated, and all this stuff. And how could you even ask this about Collins?
Yeah. Which was kind of caught us by surprise.
Well, I mean, it feels like he didn't really line up at nose too much this year, but given the other players that Texas has, at least on the roster right now, not as assuming that there's not a huge Aaron Bryant or huge Sadir Mitchell breakout, which we would love to see, the guys that truly look like real fire plug, big bodied nose types. Collins is a big, long-armed, I guess he can play anywhere. I don't necessarily think he needs to play at nose, but he's probably best suited just because of how big he is. So is with the current guys, and to hear from Sweat that's just
common knowledge.
Common
knowledge
it's like laughable. It's laughable to even ask if he can play that. It made me think that probably as we're projecting this going into the spring, we might think that we'll probably be seeing some Alfred Collins play inside at that nose and that one shade that Byron Murphy was featured at so much this last season. The stuff about Kelvin Banks, I did ask him. I was like, "Do you go up against Kelvin Banks in practice?" And he's like, "No, man, I play on the interior." And I was like, "No, dude." I was like, "Sweat, you play 3-tech, man. Like half of the time, what you're doing is you're splitting double teams of guards and tackles. That's like your scouting report, right?" And he's like, "Oh, like he's like like in scrimmage stuff." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Look, man, I'll just tell you this about Kelvin Banks. He says he doesn't go against him. I think he would. I think what he meant is like one-on-one drills.
Yeah.
But he's saying, I'll tell you this about Kelvin Banks. He's 100% the first tackle off the board next year.
Yeah.
So he's saying that's the level of player that he is, and to hear that from him is, certainly it's coming from a high level dude. So something to keep in mind there. He was asked about his hobbies. He says he does have very, very rich friends, guys like Tom G in the chat. He says he likes going on big lake houses and hanging out with rich friends and playing video games. So that was kind of an interesting thing. What did you think? I think that you're the one who's sitting here now pondering how he's going to test after he made everybody's eyes bug out.
I feel pretty good. I mean, just based on seeing his stature and what he looked like, and I saw him at the Senior Bowl up close. I talked to him for 3-4 minutes up there, and he wasn't small at the Senior Bowl. We'll just put it that way. And today he looked leaned out. He looked, I don't want to say healthy or happier, but he looked like a much more energized human. And, that leaves me to believe he probably played the Senior Bowl in that 375 to 380 area. And today I would, if I had to guess, I'm betting tomorrow he weighs in 356, 358, 359, 360. Like I'm assuming that goal of his was to weigh in sub 360. And I think I'm a little probably hot. You think I'm a little hot on it, but running like a 4.89 40, you talk about the jaw dropping. He needs to run sub 5. Like that would be fantastic.
If he wants to make jaws drop, I think anything sub 5 is jaw drop.
But you want to compare Jordan Davis, right? Was 341 pounds a couple years ago. He ran 4.78. So that's just for the people at home listening to know tonight when you do watch 4.78, 341 pounds. Sweat. We'll see if he comes in 360. What he runs.
But that's the thing is coming into this event, nobody was saying T'Vondre Sweat's going to be an athletic testing freak the same way that they were about Jordan Davis. So it'll if he does something in that neighborhood, I personally think it
would be surprised.
I would be surprised, and I do think if he runs sub 5 seconds, that's going to be enough to get all the talking heads completely. But he doesn't need to run 4.74. Like T'Vondre Sweat's just such a big. I mean, he would.
That would be dumb.
I mean, if he runs 4.9, if you like, I always say, man, like if you're standing on the 40-yard line and he has some pads on, and he's running 40 yards at you in a 4.9, and you're not wearing any football pads, he would send you straight to the grave. Like moving that fast, it would be like a motorcycle hitting you. So, all right.
I got a note on Byron Murphy.
Yes,
I thought Byron Murphy was a conversation that was had. I remember, in December, definitely a lot on a lot of the shows was if Byron Murphy's going to come back. If Alfred Collins was going to come back, if a multitude of these guys were going to potentially come back to Texas, and the question was posed to Byron today,
he was never coming back.
Were you going to come back? And he's like, no. He said no. He basically said in the middle of the season there was a feeling, and he says as soon as we won the Big 12 championship, I knew I had the feeling this was my year, and then definitely as soon as the college football playoff hit, I said this is a wrap. And he goes, I put enough on tape. There was no questions, and he reiterated that a multitude of times, like. I know what I put on tape. NFL teams know what I put on tape. He just kept saying, I know what I bring to the table. NFL teams know what I bring to the table. And I thought that was a positive note because they talked about how destructive he was. He was asked also in interviews like, what are you getting told by teams? You're destructive. you're a menace. You use great leverage and all these different things, and like that's
he's a lot more open to talking about himself
100%.
than T'Vondre Sweat
100%.
is. Sweat deflects onto other people. He talks about his teammates. He says it's all about the guy next to me and stuff. Byron Murphy's there to tell you that he's the best defensive lineman that there is, and not to say one of those is better than the other, right?
Yeah.
It's just the difference.
It's kind of cool to sit back and look at it. And when you watch the season, like T'Vondre did get all the pub all year, won the trophies, and now the kind of roles are kind of reversed, and Murphy's the one sitting in the chair to kind of become maybe potentially a top 15 pick if the testing goes well. He's
balled up,
bricked up,
just some kind of just thick, dense, some kind of substance, some kind of mean dude. His leg, the dude.
I know some big legs when I see some big legs.
Yeah, man. And look, these are guys that we've been around a ton of practices and we've been in media availabilities and stuff. But dude, I think that this stuff just kind of hits different when they've been in their combine training for the last six weeks. He looks really good. The one thing he said, he was asked about where,
next
year, not necessarily next year, but who's going to be the next sort of big star on defense that Texas is going to have here at the combine. And he just said, well, you guys already know him because he played last year, but Anthony Hill's after 3 years, he will be a first round pick.
Yeah.
So kind of the same attitude from him about Anthony Hill as T'Vondre Sweat had about the offensive lineman Kelvin Banks. All right. Well, the other guy we talked to was Jalen Ford, who had some interesting things to say. Just a lot of stuff about being the quarterback of the, what's it like being the quarterback of the defense. He actually, he had a bunch of people around him, a bunch of people interested in talking to Jalen Ford and kind of getting to know him. All the idiots that come around and say, "Which team have you interviewed with?" Or "What would it be like to play for the Raiders?"
Hey, Alex, do you want to play for Tampa Bay?
Yeah,
how would it mean to play next to Devin White?
It's just such bad content. I can't believe that. Like I was telling our friend Maddie earlier, who's staying here with us, it's like, man, sometimes I wish I could tell these guys, because a lot of times there's younger guys and they're younger podcasters with, for some of these beats. Like they have like a Carolina Panthers podcast, right? And they want to hear these players meet with every team, and so whenever they're going around and ask if you've met with the team, and they say yes, and you get that as a piece of like the people who are watching this don't care. That's not, it's like, it's a giant waste of time for us who are asking real questions, for the players that need to take that time whenever they're getting to meet with the national media, and just for them. But just regardless, that's a stupid side tangent people don't care about.
But for the people at home, literally think about this piece of content right here. Very simply, people ask this question: have you met with the Panthers? Yes. What would it mean to play behind Derek Brown? It would be fantastic because Derek Brown's a good defensive tackle. Like it's football, dude.
And they'll be getting paid $4.67 million per year. And like yes, fine. Send me to Carolina. It's like send me anywhere as long as it's not the CFL.
They're never going to say anything negative. It's just it's the most.
Can you imagine them saying like, I'm not sure about Carolina?
Yeah, man. They don't have any good. They don't have any good linemen. I'm good.
It's stupid. Okay, and then with Ford, I think, dude, deal with the most. We can just. I mean. I'm not sure really what even he said. He gave very. He wasn't T'Vondre Sweat up there, just out there, just spitting fire and do all the rest. He's more mild mannered. He give, he's an intelligent, an intelligent young dude that just kind of minds his P's and Q's. But I thought that do you have something that you want?
I was going to say T'Vondre Sweat said the next in line. T'Vondre Sweat said Kelvin Banks was going to be a first round pick.
Yeah.
Murphy said Anthony Hill was next. Who did Ford bring up?
This is the most interesting
This
one.
is the most. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Out of the stone blue, out of nowhere, he gets asked this question by the guy from the Eagles. I forget his name. He said, "So who's next? Who's the Texas player that we have not heard about, who is, that people are going to be acquainted with really soon?" And out of the stone cold blue, guess what he says? Jelani McDonald.
Well,
mic drop.
There was an interesting way to end a segment, isn't there? Like, and first of all, let's put some respect on Jelani McDonald's name. Like maybe those guys, maybe Jalen Ford knows something about Jelani McDonald that we don't know. Like,
Yep.
come on, man.
That's it. It is wild to me that NFL folks, especially if you're saying like a pro guy is asking that question. What a weird question for an NFL person to ask. You're trying to assess whether this person can be a part of your team. Why do you care who the next big thing at Texas is? Y'all can get to that when you get to that. That's such a weird question. It's good for us. It's cool. It's cool content for us because we know that our fans and our viewers want to know about this year's team and who's the next big thing. And that's cool. I'm just wondering why NFL people would ask. But there's some great stuff in there, Anwar, including the T'Vondre Sweat part. Got me a little more confident in what I hope to see today from Sweat. And man, let's just hope. I hope Cody's right. Cody's been saying for a week he thinks 355, 56 to 355 to 360 is possible. I hope so. And hopefully the drills look great and he gets that attempt. Murphy's already getting the love. And then does Murphy continue to look great? How high is he going to be thought of in this first round? That's what's today at the draft, 2:00 this afternoon on NFL Network. They'll start firing it up.
Last thing I'll say, Chad, is I hope the wait is good for T'Vondre. At the end of the day, those days of what's my main man's name? I mentioned before, but who's the guy that used to play for Green Bay? The grave digger was Gilbert Brown. I think
Gilbert Brown.
Yep. Like those days are gone. Like in today's NFL, no one's just running straight through the A gap anymore. Like there's a little bit more spread offenses, so you've got to be able to show these teams that you can at least be a 3-down guy, not just a 2-down guy. And so if he gets a weight down, and you can show these NFL teams like, okay, we give you this money, you're going to be responsible with this, and you're not going to eat your way out of the league. That's a pretty good thing for him. So hopefully it all works out. As this show has worked out, Chad, I've appreciated you being on here, being an early riser and coming on here this morning.
Hey, like you said, I was an old man who was already up, so I'm good.
Hey, before we go, Chad, why don't we tell the people about specs? We hadn't talked about that today.
Yeah, let's do it. In fact, I have a specific specs need after a beverage last night. I'll let Lisa tell you about specs first.
No matter what you're needing, Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Specs. Cheers to savings.
Last night, I was slow sipping on some Peach Deep Eddy vodka, and I was happy until I looked at the bottle and realized it's almost gone. I got to get over to Specs and get stocked up on my Deep Eddy Peach and Orange vodka. I think those are my two favorite flavors of the Deep Eddy vodka. And Anwar, there's a brand new giant Specs up on the toll road for people who know Pflugerville. Toll Road 130. It used to be a Best Buy, and now it's a big old Specs. So that's where I'm headed to get stocked up when it is time to get stocked back up.
That is awesome. Okay, one last thing here. I want to make sure we get in is for one of Alex's guys, the Texas Beef Traders. That's one of Alex's good people here. Do you got that QR code fired up as well?
I do. Texas
at the
Beef
top.
Traders. That's right. We'll do that.
At the very top. It's not covering your face, though. I don't like that.
That's all right. That's all right.
There we go.
We'll throw them over there.
Much better. Listen. Alex will rave about this, and Alex can do a much better job than I can, but all I know is if you can go to those department stores and get that kind of meat that comes from God knows where, that's been shot up with God knows what, and that thing has been sitting in your living room, or you can head out to Lakeway to Texas Beef Traders. I don't know if you ever checked out their website, Chad. They got some good eating out there, Chad. That good old Southern eating. For a guy like you, like an Elgin kind of guy who likes good food, Texas Beef Traders, they're the kind of people that got you covered with all kinds of the steaks look amazing. I wish I could make them as well as they can. They'll even go ahead, if you just let them know Alex sent you, They'll do all kinds of nice little hookups for you. So Texas Beef Traders, use that promo code, use that QR that's out there. But make sure you check out Texas Beef Traders out there in Lakeway.
Yeah, it makes me hungry every time he talks about it. TexasBeefTraders.com, and that you got your promo code there to use. Yeah, he can't stop talking about it, and I get hungry every time Alex talks about it.
Yes. All right, man. You want to send us home, Chad?
We'll do it. That is your old-fashioned for the day. One more of those for the week tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I'm assuming more from Alex and Cody from the Combine. We'll see how all that rolls out. Remember
that beautiful backdrop.
Yes, we're not going to talk about the backdrop, and we won't talk about the hat that Alex is wearing while Cody is rocking bringing the gun show. It's just kind of a weird combo. But hey, whatever they need to do to get the Combine reports. You'll have more of that coming. You got House Divided today. We got the Modcast this afternoon at 4. Tonight at 9, get you an Outsider show, including Chance Mott, breaking down a little Arch Manning versus Vince Young. Is Arch going to be another Vince Young? The good, the bad, the confusing, the weird. Chance and Vince Young went into an interesting situation in 2003. We're going to compare and contrast that to what Quinn and Arch are going into this year. So hopefully we'll get some good, we always do, get some good honesty out of Chance about what was happening. Because Anwar, I was going through some of those box scores in 2003, and all I kept asking myself was, were they telling these two guys that this is what they were going to do? Because, man, it's just crazy. So we'll get into all that today. Thanks to everybody for liking, subscribing, and getting the notifications for the channel. Until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning for the next Old Fashioned. I'm Chad Hastings, and that guy right there is your unk. He's got the belts. He's the man. It's Anwar Richardson. It's Orange Bloods Live. Y'all have a good day.